Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are walking back into the past. We're going to a very specific time and place where the world felt, a little quieter, but perhaps a lot more dangerous than anyone realized.
It really was. We're talking about a crisp, cold afternoon, December 1st, 1946.
And the setting?
The setting is the rural beauty of Vermont, specifically near Glastonbury Mountain. It's the kind of scenery you see on a postcard, rolling hills, snow dusting the evergreens, the air is biting but fresh.
And right in the middle of this huge white and gray landscape, there's this splash of color.
A really vivid splash of color.
A bright crimson red. It's a young woman, just 18 years old, and she's walking alone. She's wearing a really distinctive red parka with a fur-trimmed hood. And she walks up a trail. The sun's beginning to dip behind the mountains, and she just steps into the tree line.
And she never steps out.
Today, we're going to examine the disappearance of Paula Jean Welden. And this isn't just a story about a missing college student, though that is, of course, tragic enough.
It's so much more than that.
This is the case that changed an entire state. It's a mystery that involves a chaotic investigation, a terrifying suspect, literary legends, and a patch of wilderness that some people, even today, claim is cursed.
It is a case that sits right at that intersection of tangible systemic failure and this really atmospheric high strangeness. We have a timeline that makes perfect sense until the very last second.
And then what?
And then we have 80 years of silence.
So let's unpack this. I think we need to understand who Paula was before she became a headline. Before she was just the girl in the red coat, she was a person. What do we know about her life before that December afternoon?
Paula Jean Welden was an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College. Now, if you know anything about Bennington, especially back in the 1940s, it was, and still is, a very progressive, very artsy institution.
Right, it has that reputation.
Exactly. It's located in North Bennington, Vermont. Paula was the eldest of 4 daughters, and she came from a fairly well-to-do family in Stamford, Connecticut.
And her family background is actually pretty relevant to how this all plays out later, isn't it? Her father was a pretty big deal.
He was William Archibald Welden. He was a prominent industrial designer and architect who worked for the Revere Copper and Brass Company.
Revere, like the pots and pans?
Well, not just that. Think about the quintessential 1940s aesthetic. He designed stylish, almost Art Deco cocktail shakers, sleek household utensils.
Oh, I can picture those exactly.
He was a man whose entire career was built on structure, function, and design. He made things that made sense.
That's a really interesting psychological profile to keep in mind. You have a father who builds order and structure, and he's about to be thrust into a situation, a missing child in the wilderness. That is the very definition of chaos.
Precisely. It absolutely sets the stage for a massive clash later on.
So what about Paula herself?
As for Paula, she's described in most of the accounts as just sort of settling into adulthood. She was interested in botany. She had a bright future. But there is this one note from her roommate that always feels important to mention.
What's that?
Her roommate said Paula had been feeling a bit blue recently.
See, that word blue always trips me up in these older cases. It's just so ambiguous. In 1946, blue could mean anything from, like failed a math test to severe clinical depression.
That is the problem. We're looking at it through a modern lens where we want to diagnose everything. Does it mean homesickness? We do know she had actually quarreled with her father recently and hadn't gone home for Thanksgiving, staying on campus instead.
Okay, so there was some tension there.
Definitely some familial tension. She was an 18-year-old girl away from home, likely feeling the pressure of those high family expectations. It could have been anything.
But then we get to the day of the disappearance itself, December 1st. And her behavior doesn't exactly scream depressed or distraught to the people who saw her that day.
No, quite the opposite, actually. Let's walk through that timeline because it's remarkably precise up until the moment it just isn't.
Okay.
It's Sunday afternoon. Paula finishes her shift at the Bennington College dining hall. She goes back to her dorm, Dewey House, which is still standing today, by the way, and she changes her clothes.
And this clothing choice is arguably the most debated aspect of the first few hours of this whole mystery. Because when you look at the weather reports, what she put on, it makes no sense for a serious hike.
It really doesn't.
Right.
She puts on blue jeans, white sneakers, and sources are specific about this. They were topsiders, not hiking boots.
Sneakers. in Vermont in December.
Right, and that bright red parka we mentioned.
I mean, I'm not an outdoorsman, but even I know that feels optimistic.
It was reckless, though probably unintentionally so. It was about 2:45 p.m. when she left. The afternoon sun was out. It wasn't freezing yet. It was probably around 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which feels fine if you're walking around.
Sure, but any local would know that once that sun goes down behind those mountains, the temperature plummets. We're talking a drop of 20, maybe 30 degrees in just a matter of hours.
And she didn't take a bag with her. No supplies.
No bag, no extra money, no flashlight, no matches, nothing.
Which suggests a couple of things, right? One, she wasn't planning on running away.
Definitely not.
And two, she wasn't planning on a long hike. She was just going for a walk.
Precisely. She told her roommate she was going for a long walk. But in the context of her gear, that probably meant, what, a couple of hours? Just enough to clear her head.
Did she want to go alone?
Actually, no. She tried to get other students to join her, but they were all busy studying or relaxing. It was a Sunday, so she ventured out by herself.
Now, back then, hitchhiking wasn't viewed with the same kind of terrifying lens we see it through today. It was a pretty common way for students to get around.
Oh, very common, especially in a safe rural area like Bennington. She walked to the campus entrance and she hitched a ride. A local contractor named Louis Knapp picked her up near a place called the Furnace Bridge.
And how far did he take her?
He drove her about 2.5 miles up to his house on Route 9.
Okay, and what was his impression of her? Because this goes back to that blue comment from her roommate. Did she seem despondent or upset to him?
Not at all. Louis Knapp described her as being in high spirits. She was chatty, she was pleasant. This directly contradicts the idea that she was walking into the woods to harm herself.
So she just seemed like a normal, happy college kid.
Exactly, like a young woman just enjoying a Sunday afternoon off from work and studies.
So from Knapp's house, she either hitched another short ride or just walked the rest of the way to Woodford Hollow. And that's where the long trail officially begins.
It is. And this is where we get the last confirmed interaction. And honestly, this part frustrates me every single time I read about it.
Because of the warning.
Because of the warning, it's just, set the scene for us.
Right. So it's around 4:00 p.m. And we need to remember, in Vermont, in December, 4:00 p.m. is late afternoon.
The sun is already dipping. The light is changing from gold to gray. The shadows are getting long and stretching across the snow.
And a group of hikers, including a man named Ernest Whitman, sometimes his name is reported as Ernie Knapp, which causes some confusion, they are coming down the trail.
They're leaving.
They're finishing their hike because it's getting cold and dark. And they see this young woman, Paula, going up.
Heading northbound. She actually stops them. She asks them questions about the trail, how far it goes, where it leads.
So she doesn't even know the trail. She's winging it.
Clearly. And these hikers, they're experienced. They look at her. They see a girl in sneakers, jeans, and a light jacket. They feel the temperature dropping on their own skin.
So they say something.
They do. They tell her, look, you're not dressed warmly enough and it's going to be dark soon. You really shouldn't go far.
And this is the moment. This is that sliding doors moment in the story. She could have turned around. She could have walked back down the trail with them back to safety. But she doesn't. Why?
That's the 80-year-old question, isn't it? Stubbornness. Youthful ignorance. Maybe she thought, oh, I'll just go a little further, see the view from that one bend. We'll never know.
She just ignores the warning.
She thanks him. Probably polite but dismissive, And she keeps walking north along what's known as Harbor Road, heading toward the Bowles Brook Valley. The witnesses watch that red parka get smaller and smaller until it disappears into the distance.
And that is the last time she is ever confirmed to be seen by reliable witnesses.
That's it. She walks off the edge of the known world.
It's so chilling. She just vanishes. So darkness falls. The temperature drops way below freezing.
Yeah.
At what point did the alarm bells start ringing back at the college?
It wasn't immediate. It was college. People keep odd hours. When she didn't return for curfew that night, her roommate just assumed she was at the library studying for exams.
A pretty normal assumption.
Totally normal. It wasn't until the next morning, Monday, when her bed was still empty, that the roommate finally notified the college administration.
And once that notification happens, things start moving pretty fast, but also confusingly.
That's a very polite way to put it. The college mobilized immediately. We're talking students, faculty, everyone searching the campus. They notify the state's attorney and the county sheriff. But we have to understand the context of Vermont law enforcement in 1946. This is crucial to understanding why this case just went completely off the rails.
Right, because reading the file, it seems like there was no one actually in charge. There was no Vermont State Police at this time, right?
Correct. There was absolutely no centralized state police force. You had this patchwork of local sheriffs, town constables, and one state investigator named Almo Franzoni.
And these guys were prepared for something like this?
Not at all. These were local officials. They dealt with, chicken theft, drunken disorderlies, property disputes. They were not trained for a massive multi-jurisdictional manhunt or a complex missing persons case in the middle of a mountain wilderness.
And this is where Paula's father, William, enters the picture. He arrives from Connecticut expecting a professional, organized operation, and he finds what?
He finds amateur hour. And I really don't mean that to insult the people who are trying their best to help, but functionally, it was chaos.
Right.
You have this prominent, successful industrial designer who is used to efficiency, order, and blueprints. He arrives to find a search that he perceives as a completely chaotic mess. He essentially accused the local sheriffs of bungling the investigation due to a total lack of training. He was furious.
I want to stop on one specific detail you mentioned in the notes regarding this amateur hour, the gravel pit. Because when I read this, I actually had to check the source again to make sure it wasn't a typo.
You mean the sheer volume of it?
500 tons of gravel.
It sounds like hyperbole, doesn't it?
I know.
But it wasn't. It's in all the reports.
How does that even happen? We're not talking about modern excavators and heavy machinery here, right?
No,
this is 1946.
No. This is shovels. This is buckets. This is sheer panic-induced manpower. Hundreds of volunteers.
But why? Why were they digging in a gravel pit?
This just touches on the desperation of it all. When you have no leads, and I mean literally zero physical evidence, people start grasping at straws. A tip came in, likely from a clairvoyant or someone claiming to have a vision, suggesting she was buried in an abandoned gravel pit.
And they just believed it.
Because the police had absolutely nothing else, no lead, no forensic evidence, and no chain of command to say, no, hold on, that's ridiculous. So the mob mentality took over. They literally moved a mountain by hand because the psychic told them to.
It's just desperate. It really paints a picture of how lost they were. They were just doing something so they didn't have to feel helpless.
Exactly. It was action for the sake of action. And while they are digging in a gravel pit, moving 500 tons of rock, the trail is getting colder and colder.
And the father, William Welden, he sees all this and he just starts pulling strings.
He does. He pressures the governor of Vermont, Mortimer Proctor. He basically says, your people can't handle this. Get me real police.
So they call in help from outside, which must have been a massive slap in the face to local Vermont authorities.
Oh, it was a public humiliation. They brought in investigators from the Connecticut State Police Detective Robert Rundle and policewoman Dorothy Scoville. Think about the optics of that. Vermont has to borrow police from Connecticut to find a girl lost in their own woods because they don't have a force capable of doing it themselves.
And to make matters even worse, there was a huge reward posted, $5,000. In 1946, that is a life-changing amount of money.
It was a fortune. That's like a year's salary or more for a lot of people back then.
And that helped, right?
No, unfortunately, it did the opposite. Instead of generating solid leads, it just generated chaos. It incentivized people to invent stories or report absolutely anything they saw. There were sightings all over the country. A waitress in Fall River, Massachusetts, was sure she served dinner to Paula. A train conductor down in South Carolina thought he saw her.
But none of them were her.
None of them. They were all phantoms. The reward just muddied the waters exactly when they needed clarity. It turned a tragic investigation into a circus.
So we have this botched search, a furious father, and a missing girl. But looking back at the files, there was a specific person of interest, a thread that investigators pulled on pretty hard. We should talk about Fred Godet.
Fred Godet is the closest thing this case has to a prime suspect, although he was never charged with anything. He was a lumberjack, a rough around the edges kind of character who lived in a little shack along Harbor Road.
Right in the path Paula was walking.
Exactly. And on the afternoon of December 1st, Fred Godet wasn't just sitting on his porch whittling wood. He was in a rage. He had been arguing with his girlfriend, a really violent, jealous argument.
So his emotional state was already volatile. He's angry. He's heated.
Highly volatile. And he admits to seeing Paula. He saw the girl in the red parka walk by his shack. But his story kept changing. It wobbled.
What were the different versions?
Okay, so first he said he went back to his shack alone after the argument. Then he changed it and claimed he drove up the trail, the very trail Paula was walking on.
That's a big change.
It's huge. He told police at one point he saw her enter the woods. Then later he claimed he saw her get into a car with someone else. The story just kept shifting.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Is there any innocent reason a guy changes his story 4 times, or is this just straight up guilt?
Well, if we're being charitable, maybe it's fear. He's a roughneck, a lumberjack living in a shack. He knows how the cops are going to view him. He's just had a big fight with his girlfriend. Now the police are sniffing around about a missing rich college girl.
So he panics.
Maybe he thinks, if I place myself at the scene at all, they'll pin it on me. So he lies to distance himself, then gets caught in the lie, and has to invent a new lie to cover the old one.
It's the liar's paradox. You lie to look innocent, which just makes you look even more guilty.
Precisely. But it gets stranger. Years later, Gaudette allegedly told people, kind of a drunken boast in a bar, that he knew where she was buried. He claimed he knew the spot within 100 feet.
Wow. Did the police follow up on that?
They did. In 1952, the case was revisited. They pressed him hard on these statements, and he recanted everything. He claimed it was just idle talk. He said he just wanted to annoy the authorities because he hated them.
That's a really dangerous game to play if you're innocent.
It is. The theory, of course, is that his rage toward his girlfriend transferred. That he drove up the trail, saw this vulnerable young woman walking alone, and in a moment of opportunistic violence, something happened.
But,
and this is the big but, there was never a shred of forensic evidence. No body, no items of clothing found in his shack, nothing to definitively link him to a crime.
so he just remains this dark question mark hanging in the middle of the timeline.
He does. But if we zoom out, Fred Gaudette isn't the only dark shadow in this story. Because Paula's disappearance didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the location itself.
Yes. The Bennington Triangle.
The Bennington Triangle.
Now, for our listeners, we aren't saying this is some supernatural vortex, but the statistics, they're undeniably eerie. Paula wasn't the only person to vanish in this specific area during this specific period of time.
No, she wasn't. The author Joseph A. Citro coined that term, Bennington Triangle, to describe this cluster of disappearances that all happened between 1945 and 1950.
That's a very tight window.
It's incredibly tight. 5 years, 5 people.
Let's run through the others, because it sets a context that is really hard to ignore. It starts before Paula, right?
It starts in 1945, a year before Paula vanished.
Yeah.
The first was Mitty Rivers. Now, this case is fascinating because it totally defies the lost novice theory. Mitty was 74 years old, an experienced hunting guide. He knew these woods better than anyone alive.
So he wasn't alone out there.
No, he was leading a group of 4 hunters near Glastonbury Mountain. He got separated from them, just walked slightly ahead of the group around a bend, and he was gone.
And they found nothing.
They found a single rifle shell casing from his gun. That's it. An experienced woodsman, gone without a single trace.
Okay, so that's one. Then Paula in 46.
Then in 1949, you get the case of James Tedford. And this one. This one is, for my money, the most baffling of them all.
You mentioned a bus in the notes, and usually a bus is the safest place you can be. You've got witnesses, a driver, a confined space.
Exactly. Which is what makes the James Tedford case the most impossible of the bunch.
Yeah.
It's like a locked room mystery, but the room is moving. Picture this. It's 1949. Tedford is a veteran. He gets on a bus in St. Albans, heading back to the Bennington Soldiers' Home.
And people saw him on the bus.
14 witnesses. 14 people confirmed he was in his seat.
14 people. Okay, so we are not relying on one person's shaky memory here.
No. They saw him sleeping. They saw his luggage in the rack above him. They saw an open bus timetable on his lap. The bus doesn't make any stops where he could have just slipped off unnoticed. It arrives in Bennington. People stand up to get off. The luggage is there. The timetable is there. James Tedford does not.
He vanished from a moving vehicle. That doesn't make physical sense.
It doesn't. Now, logically, he must have slipped off at a stop unnoticed, or maybe the witnesses were wrong about when they last saw him. But the narrative that persists, the one that the police couldn't shake, is that he simply ceased to exist between stops.
That is deeply unsettling. And then in 1950, things ramp up again.
October 12th, 1950. Paul Jepson, an 8-year-old boy. His mother was feeding pigs at a local dump they tended to. She left him in their truck for just a moment to go attend to the animals. When she turned back, he was gone.
And usually with a lost kid, you assume they just wandered off into the woods.
Right. But here's the kicker. They brought in bloodhounds. The dogs tracked his scent to a nearby highway, and then the scent just stopped, abruptly, like he'd been lifted into the air or into a car. But he was never, ever found.
And finally, there was Frida Langer.
Frida Langer, also in 1950, just a couple weeks after Paul Jepson. She's hiking with her cousin near the Somerset Reservoir. She fell in a stream, got her clothes wet, and told her cousin she was going to run back to their camp, which was just a half-mile away, to change clothes.
And she never made it back to camp.
Never made it. But her case is different from the others in one very specific, very crucial way.
Which is?
She's the only one whose body was ever found.
Okay, so that should provide some answers.
It should, but the discovery only deepened the mystery. Her body was found months later, the following spring. It was found in an open area of tall grass that had been searched extensively, some say as many as a dozen times, by search parties, by aircraft, by dogs.
So the implication is that her body wasn't there during the search, and it was moved there later.
That is the implication. But because of the severe decomposition after a long winter out in the elements, no cause of death could be determined.
It's a terrifying cluster. 5 years, 5 people. What are the theories here? I mean, the obvious one is a serial killer.
A serial killer is the most grounded, logical theory. Someone operating in that area, perhaps a local who knew the terrain intimately. It would explain the tight timeline, 1945 to 1950. Maybe they moved away or died or got locked up for something else after 1950, and the disappearances stopped.
But the whole triangle theory, the folklore, it leans into something else entirely.
It leans into the paranormal. You hear theories about interdimensional portals, wild men of the woods, Native American curses regarding Glastonbury Mountain being a sacred, forbidden place. But from an investigative standpoint, we also have to look at the terrain itself.
Right. It's not a city park.
Not even close.
Mm-hmm.
The ruggedness is a huge factor. This isn't a manicured trail. It's dense forest. There are old wells from abandoned 19th century settlements, sudden drop-offs, hidden ravines. It's incredibly easy to get hurt and become hidden by the underbrush very, very quickly.
But Paula was on a road, Harbor Road.
She was. But if something or someone made her step off that road.
This brings us back to the theories that are specific to Paula. We have Fred Gaudette. We have the potential serial killer idea. But what about the simplest explanation? Just the elements.
The exposure theory. And we have to give this serious weight. She was wearing a light parka and sneakers. Temperatures dropped well below freezing that night. If she got turned around in the dark, maybe she saw something that scared her, ran off the trail into the woods, and got lost. Hypothermia would set in incredibly quickly.
But wouldn't they have found her? They had hundreds of searchers out there.
You'd think so. But the woods are vast and can hide things very well. And let's not forget the false hope theories. The idea that maybe she just ran away. The roommate said she was blue. Could she have staged her disappearance to start a new life?
But she left all her money. She left her belongings. That doesn't track for someone planning to run away.
Exactly. It's highly, highly unlikely. And the suicide theory, that she walked into the woods to end her life, that doesn't track with Louis Knapp saying she was in high spirits just an hour before she vanished.
So we are just left with this void. But even though Paula was never found, her disappearance did leave something tangible behind. It actually changed the state of Vermont forever.
It did. We talked about her father's rage earlier. William Welden didn't just complain, he campaigned. He used the embarrassment of this botched investigation to pressure the political powers that be.
And the governor listened.
Well, Governor Mortimer Proctor was on his way out, but the incoming governor, Ernest Gibson, used this case as a political bludgeon. He shamed the legislature. He essentially stood up and said, "Look at us. We are relying on charity from Connecticut to find our own people. This is a disgrace."
And it worked.
It worked. Just 7 months later, in 1947, the Vermont State Police was officially created. The VSP exists today directly because Paula Jean Welden walked into those woods and nobody with the proper training was there to find her.
That is a massive concrete legacy. But her legacy isn't just legal or political, it's literary too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Do you know who was living in North Bennington at the exact time this was all happening?
Shirley Jackson, the queen of Gothic horror.
The one and only. Her husband, Stanley Edgar Hyman, was a professor at Bennington College. Shirley Jackson was right there when this happened. The anxiety, the rumors, the massive search, it all just seeped into her writing.
Her novel Hanksman is inspired by this case, right?
It's heavily inspired by it. The book deals with a young woman at a small Vermont college who is slipping into madness and then vanishes. And her short story, The Missing Girl, also touches on the same themes.
And it didn't stop there.
No. Even decades later, Donna Tartt, who wrote The Secret History, which is arguably the ultimate dark academia novel set at a Bennington-esque college, cited the Welden case as a direct inspiration. Paula became this archetype of the lost girl.
So here we are in 2026. It's been 80 years, the case is cold. Paula was declared legally dead in absentia long, long ago. Is there any hope left at all?
Well, technology is doing things now that were pure science fiction in 1946. We have to talk about LiDAR.
I hear that term a lot lately, LiDAR. I know it stands for light detection and ranging, and I know archaeologists use it to find like Mayan ruins in the jungle, but how does it actually work? How can it help find a body in Vermont?
Okay, so think of it like a super advanced laser scanner. A drone or a small plane flies over the forest and it shoots millions of laser pulses down at the ground. Some of those pulses hit the top of the trees and bounce back. But some find the tiny gaps between the leaves and branches and hit the actual forest floor.
Okay, so you get a map of the trees and the ground.
You get a 3D cloud of points, basically.
Yeah.
But here is the magic. You can tell the computer to digitally delete the first return, the trees, the canopy. You can digitally strip away all the vegetation, and what you are left with is a naked, high-resolution map of the Earth itself.
So you can see the actual shape of the ground without the forest getting in the way.
Exactly. You can see depressions in the Earth that shouldn't be there. You can see old, forgotten wells that aren't on any maps. You can see what are called terrain traps, steep ravines or crevices where a body might have fallen and been completely concealed from the naked eye of a searcher walking right past it.
So even if the vegetation has grown over something for 80 years, the shape of the hole in the ground remains?
Right. And hobbyists and serious researchers have been using LiDAR drones over the Glastonbury area for the last couple of years, from 2024 to present. It's the best chance we have to find an anomaly that 1946 eyes just missed.
It's amazing to think that a laser from a drone might solve a mystery that hundreds of men walking shoulder to shoulder couldn't.
It is, but there's a reason the solvability is still so low. The crime scene, if it was a crime scene, was trampled into oblivion. Those hundreds of well-meaning volunteers in 1946, they destroyed any footprints. They moved evidence. They completely contaminated the entire area.
So we're looking for a needle in a haystack.
And the haystack has been kicked around and rearranged for 80 years.
It just brings us back to that central image, the red Parker against the snow.
It does.
There is something so profoundly lonely about this story. An 18-year-old girl stepping out for a breath of fresh air, maybe to clear her head, maybe just to enjoy the snow, and the world just swallows her whole.
It really reminds us of the vulnerability of solitude. We think we're safe because we're on a road or because we're close to home. But nature is completely indifferent. And if there was a predator out there, whether it was Fred Gaudette or someone else, they were indifferent too.
And yet, because she vanished, the Reds in Vermont are safer today. Because she was lost, the Vermont State Police was found. It's such a heavy, tragic trade-off.
It is. A terrible loss of one individual resulted in a safer system for everyone else. But that doesn't bring Paula home.
No, it doesn't. And that red coat remains out there in our collective imagination, forever walking away from us into the twilight. A young man disappears after leaving his office holiday party in Dublin and is never seen again. Next time, we examine the case of Trevor Dealey.